Hello guys and welcome back to this Brick Breaker tutorial. In the previous video, we went over how to create blocks and how to instantiate in a grid. Today, we will add physics to them. So let's get started. So, first of all, let's open our block prefab, and to add a collider, it's pretty simple. Just click here on Add Component and look for a box collider. Box collider 2D, and there it is. So these settings here are: first, you can click on Edit Collider here to edit collider manually. You can change the shape like that. Here, Physics Material, where you can change the physics property of the object. Is Trigger detects collision, but it doesn't prevent objects from overlapping. Used by Effector and used by Composite, these are related to other components. Auto tiling here, it's used for tiling, we won't be using that. Offset and size are self-explanatory. If I change these values, it offsets the collider. And the edge radius, you see it just adds a radius to our object. And here we have the info, where we have the data of our collider. Next, we need to add a collider to the ball and to the player bar. Let's go back to our scene, select the player, and add a component. This time we will need a rigid body because we're going to move this object. We use the rigid body if we want to move an object according to physics. So here we have the body type, dynamic, or kinematic movement, or static if you won't move it. Kinematic is used if you're gonna move it through script. Here we have this physics material, simulated here for physics simulation. Use auto mass, it just accords the mass to your object according to its surface. We don't need that. Here, linear drag and angular drag are physics properties. We won't get into that. And we have the gravity scale, how much gravity is applied to this object. We won't apply gravity here, so let's keep this at 0. And here we have collision. So we want the collision to be continuous. Sleeping mode, we don't want to change that. It's the order that functions will be executed. And here interpolate, we want to put this to interpolate to smooth its movement. Now for the constraints, we don't want this to move on the y-axis, so let's fix that. And we don't want it to rotate on the z-axis, so here is the rotation on the z-axis like that. We don't want it to do that, so let's check that constraint and put this back to 0. Also, let's put all these values to 0, and we will add now another box collider. Now the collider and the rigid body work together to detect collision and move. Next, we'll do the same thing for the ball, but first let's turn it into a prefab. Let's drag it here. Now, open the prefab, and we will add a rigid body 2D, put all these to 0, continuous detection, and let's freeze rotation. And we want it to move on both axes, so let's keep it at that. Now, we will add a circle collider. And we're done here. Go back to the scene view, and now I want to assign layers to these objects. So assigning layers is pretty simple. Go here to layer and click on add layer. Let's add a few ones. First ball, then player, and block. Also we want to add a wall, so let's add it. We will add walls later. Now go back to the prefab and assign the layer like that. So ball here. Here we want to assign the block layer, and to the player we will assign the player layer. Now let's go to Edit, Project Settings, go to Physics, 2D, and down here you will find this matrix where you can choose what layers collide with each other. So we want the player to collide only with the ball and the walls eventually. So here in the player and check everything else. And you have the player and ball here. Next, the ball, eventually we will add other balls, so we want them to collide with each other. Here the ball will collide with walls and blocks. Blocks won't be colliding with each other, neither with the walls, and walls won't collide with each other. Let's put back this player and wall collision, and we're done with that. Now we need to create a player script, so let's go to our scripts folder and create a new C# script and call it player. Let's open it. And as always, we have these two methods. Start is executed once the object is first started, and the update method executes every frame. So, in order to control our player, first we need a speed. So, we want it to be serialized. So, serialize field, private, float, and we will call it speed. Next, we need a reference for the rigid body. So, private, rigid body 2D, and we will call it rigid body. Now to get the reference, go to the start method and rigid body 2D equals, in order to get a component, it's pretty simple. Just get component. Here, give it the component type. We want a rigid body 2D, and it will get the component automatically. Next, we need a variable where we're gonna read the player input. So private float, and we are gonna read the horizontal input value. So let's call this horizontal. And in the update method, we're gonna read it. So horizontal equals input dot get axis row, and here we write horizontal. So what does this do? If we go back to the Unity editor, wait for it to compile, go to edit and project settings. If you go to the input tab, so here, and go to axis, here we have preset buttons. So if I expand horizontal, the name is horizontal and the buttons are A, D, left and right. If ever your keyboard mapping is not the same AZERTY or QWERTY, you don't have to go and change all of these. Just click here and it will use physical keys. So the left button, for example, will always be the key next to the caps button. Now we read the value, now we need to apply it. So whenever you want to move things according to physics, you need a fixed update method here. So let's apply it to the velocity. It's held within the rigid body 2D. So rigid body 2D dot velocity equals vector3.right, which will give us 1 on the x and 0 on the y. We will multiply it by horizontal value. This will give us 1 if it's going to the right direction and -1 if we are going to the left direction. So this here gives us direction, and we will multiply it again by speed. Now this here is done. Let's go back to the Unity editor, wait for it to compile. Don't forget to assign the script here. Let's minimize these and simply drag and drop it. Now set the speed value to something like 15 and let's run the game. Now you see I can move the bar pretty easily, but we can go off the borders. We will fix that in a second. But first, let's add movement to the ball. To do that, we need to assign a velocity to the ball, but just at the first throw. So in order to do that, we will create another object that will manage this. Let's create a new game object, call it manager, and let's create another script for it. So C# script and call it manager. open it, and this is gonna be a single instance, so we will make it a singleton. A singleton will ensure that this object always has only one instance running. In order to do that, it's pretty simple. So public manager instance, and we will make this static so it's shared between all of its instances. Static, and in the start method, if instance is null, so there is no other instance, then instance equal to this, else. If instance not equal to this, so it's not null, and not equal to this, so there is another instance of it, in that case we will destroy this, so destroy this. This will ensure that we always have a single instance of this object. Next, we need a reference to the ball and to the player. So, serialized field player, player, and another one for the ball. We will create the ball script in a moment. And we will need another boolean value to check if it's the first throw. So we'll make this private too, and we don't need it to be serialized actually, so just bool and is start, and it will start at true. Next we will create a script for the ball. It will be empty for now, so create C# script and call it ball. Let's assign it to the prefab, not to the ball here. So go to the prefabs folder, add component, and you can search for it from here. Search for ball, and that's it. Now, if we go to our manager, go to scripts, assign this script here, and for the player, we assign the player from here, and for the ball, we assign this one. Actually, we haven't given it the script yet because we gave it only to the prefab. Let's give it here and go back to our manager, assign it like that. So if we have here, for example, the player, and we have the ball starting from here, so the ball won't be going directly up. Instead, it will be going this way. Same, if it is here slightly to the left, it will be this way but on a smaller angle. Same for the right here, it will go with a big angle if it is on the edge, and smaller angle the more it goes to the center. So to do that, we need to calculate the distance between the center of the player and the center of the ball, whether it's to the left or to the right, and also we need to divide it by half the width of the player. Let's do this. So go back here, go back to Rider, and we will do that in the update method. So this will only trigger if it's the start. So if is start and the player pressed on, let's say, the space button, for example. So input dot get key down key code dot space. So if it is the first throw and the player pressed space, we will create a float that will hold the distance between the player and the ball. So distance equals player dot transform dot position. So this will give us a vector 3 of the player's position, and we want the position on the x-axis minus ball dot transform dot position dot x. This will give us the distance between the two of them. Next, we will get half the width of the player, so float half width equals player dot get component collider box collider 2D and bounce dot extent dot x. This gives us half the width of the collider and thus half the width of the player. Next, if this distance equals 0, we don't want the ball go directly upwards, so we will add a little offset to it. So if this equals 0, let's say distance will be equal to a random number between, let's say, -2 and 2. Next, we will give it the velocity. So how is that? The player is here, this is the ball. When it's going like that, don't mind the position here, we're just interested in the vector. This y value here will always be 1, and this value here will be the distance divided by half the width. So at maximum it will be 1, and we will have a 45 degree. That's if we are on the edge here. So let's get into that. And vector 2, new velocity, equals new vector 2, and on the x value we will give it distance divided by half width and 1 on the y-axis. Let's apply this new velocity here. So ball dot get component rigid body 2D dot velocity equals new velocity multiplied by the ball's speed. And we will add this now. Speed. Let's go to the ball script, and here we will add a value for speed. So let's make this public. Float speed. Now we want also to set is start to false. Go back to the Unity editor, wait for it to compile, go to the ball and assign a value for the speed, let's say about 10, bring it down a little, somewhere around here will be fine, just very close to the bar. Also, if we run the game like that and I press space, the ball will be stuck there and direction is off, it should be going the other way. We'll fix that now, then we will fix the ball getting stuck there. So go back here and just add minus to the distance. So where? Here. Add minus here. And that's it. If we go back, wait for it to compile, run the game, and there it is. The ball is stuck on the blocks. Fixing that is pretty simple. Just go to the materials here. We'll create a physics 2D material. So go to create 2D physics 2 material 2D, call it ball. This will be the ball's physics material. Set friction to 0 and bounciness to 1. Assign it in the rigid body. Go to the prefabs, select the ball's prefab and assign it like this. Now if I run the game, you'll see that everything works pretty well. Like that. So this is it for this video. In the next video we're going to add the walls and we will make the blocks break. So if you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like this video, and see you next time.